Hi everyone. So I was writing out emails in response to people's questions and discovering I was sending out a lot of similar information. It might be easier to hear this in a video format instead of by writing. So just to go through some of the common feedback and issues that you got from me. So you need to think about your paper. You're working on one of the three populations that Cindy gave you, right? Refugee, immigration, the seniors stuff, and First Nations, Indigenous, Aboriginal. So you're thinking about that population. You have to narrow that down a little bit. And what you're going to do is you're going to use some of this background information to do that because they're so huge, right? If you think about that entire population, everything is gigantic. So what you need to do is define the scope of the problem and the population for me a little bit. So you're going to use your demographics to do that, and that tells me the scope of the population within the general Canadian population, scope of population. And you're going to tell me some epidemiological facts that pertain to that. Okay, epidemiological, and that gives me the scope of the problem. Okay, and so it's not specifically the problem itself, but even related issues. Okay, scope of the problem and related issues. All right, from that, you're going to come up with a priority issue. Okay, so you see how this sort of is narrowing this down from this gigantic, broad population into something narrower. Okay, so a number of you were giving me all sorts of random epidemiological and population information, some of which were related to what you ultimately gave me as a priority, but some of them really weren't. So try and think about using demographic and epidemiological information that is going to funnel down and lead me to go, aha, you're right, this is the priority issue. Okay? An excellent example of that is for the Indigenous, spelling, Jen, there we go, Indigenous Aboriginal group, right? That is made up of First Nations, Inuit, that's a U, and Métis in Canada, okay? Three very large, very distinct groups. So it's a really good way to actually be able to narrow this down. There's a lot of interrelated connections between these groups and a lot of similarities, but they're three very distinct groups. So you might use that demographic to tell me, okay, among the Indigenous population, Inuit comprise this percentage, and First Inuit comprise this percentage of the Canadian population. Here's a problem of mental health issues in the north are significant, and of those, suicidality is a major issue, and so that's going to maybe funnel down and become your priority issue as an example. Okay, so then what you need to do is, in this priority issue on your outline, you had 3 more bullet points there. With those 3 bullet points, hopefully what you were able to do, and if you weren't, you might want to rethink about reorganizing to tell me, why do I care? Okay, what outcomes do those have? So you're starting to expand a little bit here. What outcomes do those have on health for that population that make me think, oh yeah, not only is this a priority issue, but we have to take action, we have to do something about it. Right? So maybe having income issues among refugees in Canada, you might want to tell me specifically that some facts about how many refugees there are in Canada, what percentage they are. Maybe they mostly live in urban centers, which tend to be more expensive, and so job finding is really difficult. especially because of language barriers and all sorts of things. There's lots of different items, but they all feed down to tell me, okay, reduced income is a problem for newly landed refugees in Canada. Why do I care? Well, that means that there's a drain on our system because people are relying on that. Or you can show me some facts that say people's health gets worse as a result of having less income on arriving to Canada. Or maybe you can tell me some other really relevant issue. People end up working in really low-paying jobs, doing multiple low-paying jobs, and never getting back into the industry that allowed them to move to Canada. So maybe you can show me 3 different things that then explain not only is this a priority, but it has these other effects that means we have to do something about it. So then the question becomes, well, what do we do about it? Well, in order to describe in an orderly way to do this, in this paper, I'm going to use the population health promotion model to describe 2 to 3 interventions at the community level that will help this problem and ultimately help Why Do I Care, right? So it's going to help do something. These are interventions, so there's something that is done out in the world, a process, an intervention that happens. It's not more facts, it's not more description, okay? So you're going to use the population health promotion model, okay, to do that. So that's that part of your paper. So as you can see here, you're kind of narrowing here, but now you're expanding a little bit. You're telling me why I care about this priority issue, but you're giving me 2 to 3 interventions using this model as a framework to describe that so that we can see briefly what levels that these interventions are focused on. Oops. Okay, in using this this population health promotion model, you need to have cited either of the primary sources. Okay, so you need to cite Flynn or Hamilton and Botti. Okay, so Cindy has given you those in lecture. So if you haven't heard these before, go back to your lecture notes, go back to your resources online. They're there, all right? That's the citation you need to use. It's at the bottom of the figure. Yeah, that's all. Like, I can't say that more plainly. You have to use the primary source. You can't use any of the secondary sources. All right, so for a number of you, I recommended using Flynn because it's an updated model. This is the original primary source. Flynn updated this and added culture, which arguably could be used for any of the 3 populations as a determinant of health. So there's also a number of other determinants of health, the way they broke it down, that's slightly different. So it may be useful to you compare the 2 models and see which one seems better for you, okay? But you need to cite one of these 2 primary sources. Okay, so these interventions are going to basically answer the question, what do we do? And for these, you needed to have these be evidence-based sources. Evidence-based. So a number of folks use journal articles. That's great. Okay. Journal articles are great because they're peer-reviewed. A number of you used government documents. They're also fine, but they're called what's called gray literature. Gray lit. And gray, if you think about the word gray, it's kind of fuzzy. All right. One thing that happens with gray literature is literature gets recycled from government report to government report. It's not peer reviewed like a journal article is. And so what happens is, and it also ends up a bit dated. Reports take a while for bureaucracy to create these. So they end up using journal articles that already spent a year in review, or books that already spent 2 or 3 years getting published. And so by the time the report comes out, they're already older and out of date. Journal articles are far more up to date. So for a number of you who used lots and lots of government documents, I suggested that you try and find some journal articles. Well, Jen, what do I do? Here I've got all of these government documents and I don't know where to find some journal articles. Well, one of the things, even though they're a little bit dated, Cindy gave you 6 years, so you can actually, here's a government doc that is in my cache of literature that I've got left over from other work that I've done, from British Columbia First Nations Health Authority, and in using this document, it's a great document for a lot of information, but it's a secondary source. They're telling me information from other primary sources. I find those primary sources in the reference list. And so if I were doing a topic that was related, I'd be able to find some of this documentation. My pen doesn't work on this. I'd be able to find some of this documentation here, and I'd be able to look. Here's one that's too old. It's 2001, but it would be on a topic that I might use, and I might look to that for keywords, so cultural competence or humility or something, or clinical settings, for looking for ideas that I might use to search. The other thing that they've got back here are the actual journal articles. Here's one from 2013, so it would fall well within Cindy's last 6 years, and it's talking about measuring openness to culturally diverse clients. So it's talking about how you can actually measure this one trait by clinicians to culturally diverse clients. All that to say, though, you can use the reference list from some of those government documents that you have to find other references. You can also, if you found one good journal article, use their reference list to find more journal articles. All right, your other giant resource for finding better literature, so if I put, find some better sources on there, are your librarians up in the 3rd floor of the Dare District. Okay, the librarians are going to be super helpful for you in this. It can be a lost afternoon diving around government websites, or using Google Scholar and just firing random words in there and hoping something bubbles to the surface. I've been there. It's not your best approach. The librarians, this is what they do. They're there to help you. They can point you in the right direction, set you off to work, give you a 10-minute limit, and say, and ask them, can I come back to you in 10 minutes after I've looked around and ask you more questions? I'm sure they'd be super happy to help.